Criminals come in many different forms, and their danger level and criminal behavior can vary. The most dangerous criminals are not judged based on their crimes, but rather their planning and strategy. A clever criminal is far more dangerous than others, as they are skilled at misleading law enforcement and carrying out crimes in unexpected ways that authorities cannot anticipate. This type of criminal blends in with society and may even go unnoticed by law enforcement. 3 years after Denise Huber vanished, something shocking was uncovered when her body was found in a highly unusual place. To understand her story, let's go back to the beginning. Denise lived a peaceful life in a wealthy neighborhood in Southern California with her family and brother Jeff. In 1990, at age 23, she graduated from the University of California with a degree in social sciences and worked as a waitress. Denise was ambitious and viewed her job at the restaurant as temporary until she could find her dream job. Denise was well-liked and social and had many friends from her job at the restaurant. There, she met her coworker and love interest, Stephen Horrocks. The two were a popular couple, and everyone talked about their relationship. One day, Stephen purchased tickets for a music concert for both of them, which was set for June 2, 1991. Denise was eager to see her favorite band perform, but on the day of the concert, Stephen called to say he couldn't attend due to something important. To still allow Denise to go, Stephen offered to give his ticket to their mutual friend and coworker, Robert Calvert. There is important information about Robert, which will be revealed later. Denise agreed to go to the concert with Robert and informed her mother that she would return late. She packed her things, tidied up her room, and left with Robert in her car. The next day, Denise's mother went to check on her, but didn't find her and her car was gone, indicating she never returned home. The mother initially believed that Denise might have stayed the night at a friend's house, so she went to work without concern. However, when she returned home and saw that Denise still wasn't back, she grew worried, as Denise would usually call if she were staying elsewhere. The mother reached out to Denise's best friend, Tammy, but she hadn't seen Denise the night before. Tammy checked with their mutual friends, but no one had seen Denise either. Finally, the mother called Robert, who was the last person to see Denise as he had gone with her to the concert. Robert informed her that the concert had ended late and that Denise had driven him home and dropped him off around 2:05 a.m. As the night went on, Denise's friends and family grew increasingly concerned because they had no news of her. Tammy took the initiative to drive along the route to the concert to look for any clues that might lead them to Denise. While driving, she spotted a car that resembled Denise's, parked on the side of Highway 73. Tammy pulled over to see if it was indeed Denise's car, a 1988 Honda. She discovered that the car was Denise's, but Denise was not in it. The car had a flat tire, specifically the rear right tire. Tammy informed Denise's parents about the car, but couldn't provide any explanation for why the car was there or where Denise was. At 10 p.m., Denise's parents called the police and reported the car's location. Minutes later, Denise's parents arrived at the scene, and the police began inspecting the car. The next morning, Denise's mother went to her room to check on her, but was surprised to find that she was not there and her car was missing. Her room was neat and tidy, indicating that she had not returned home. The mother initially thought that Denise may have stayed at a friend's house, so she went to work without worrying. However, upon returning from work, the mother was concerned to see that Denise still had not come back. As Denise would normally call if she planned to stay at a friend's house, her parents began to worry. After hours had passed without any news, the mother called Denise's best friend Tammy. Tammy told her that she hadn't seen Denise the previous night and would contact their mutual friends to see if they had any information. All their friends stated that they had not seen Denise that night. Tammy then called Robert, the last person to see Denise, as he had accompanied her to the concert. Robert said that the concert had ended late at night and Denise had driven him home and dropped him off at around 2:05 a.m. Not knowing what had happened to her or if she had come home, he went to bed. As night approached, Denise's friends and family grew increasingly worried, as they had no information about her. In an effort to find any clues that could lead them to Denise, Tammy offered to drive her car along the route to the concert, looking for any signs. As she was driving, she spotted a car that resembled Denise's parked on the side of Highway 73. Tammy pulled over, got out of her car, and confirmed that the car was indeed Denise's 1988 Honda. However, Denise was not in it. Tammy observed that the car had a flat tire, specifically the rear right one, and called Denise's parents to inform them of the situation. At 10 p.m., Denise's parents then contacted the police and reported the car's location. Within minutes, Denise's parents arrived on the scene, followed by the police. The police noticed several concerning details about the car, including the flat right rear tire, partially open window, and empty battery. They initially believed that Denise had left the car running with the lights flashing, which depleted the battery. However, when they searched the car, they found that it was empty, with no keys, Denise's purse, or any of her belongings. The police then took a description of Denise from her parents and were given a photo of her. They learned that she was wearing a black dress, black jacket, and high heels at the time of the concert. The police quickly launched a search for Denise and used helicopters and police dogs to broaden the search area. The dogs were successful in tracing Denise's trail until it abruptly ended. Despite an extensive search, the police found no evidence of struggle, kidnapping, or any stranger's blood or fingerprints. The fact that the car's flat tire was not caused by someone else led them to believe that Denise voluntarily left the car. To determine what had happened, the police first questioned Robert, the last person to see Denise, and put him through a lie detector test. Robert answered all of their questions truthfully. It was revealed that Denise's boyfriend, Stephen, had gotten busy the night of the concert and couldn't accompany her, so he asked her to go with Robert instead. Denise and Robert attended a concert where they had a great time. Afterwards, they went to a restaurant where Robert drank too much, according to him, and became unable to walk properly. Denise then drove him home and dropped him off at around 2:05 a.m. Robert claimed that he didn't contact Denise after that and had no idea what happened to her. During the police interview, Robert revealed that he was in love with Denise, but she rejected him, stating that he was just her best friend. This raises the question of whether Robert may have taken revenge on Denise, but it's unclear. Robert was not fully conscious on the night in question and spoke confidently and fearlessly with the police, offering to assist in their search for Denise. He also passed a lie detector test and did not lie about anything. Until that point, there was no incriminating evidence against him. Let's now turn our attention to other possible avenues of investigation. The police questioned those close to Denise, with her boyfriend Stephen being the first on their list. Stephen stated that he had intended to attend the concert with Denise, but had a work emergency at the restaurant. He described Denise as a kind person with no known enemies. However, he then admitted to having suspicions about Denise and Robert having a secret romantic relationship, which troubled him. This raises questions about why he suggested Denise attend the concert with Robert instead of himself. Was there truly a work emergency, or did he have ulterior motives for not attending the concert? As the one who purchased the tickets and planned the outing, Stephen's actions are suspicious. Despite everyone saying Denise was loved and had no enemies, there may have been underlying tension in her relationships that could have led to her disappearance. Despite this, Denise's parents still trusted Robert and Stephen, believing they would never harm Denise. However, the police do not rely on emotions and trust in their investigations. The police expanded their investigation and asked about Stephen and Robert at the restaurant where they worked. Their coworkers confirmed that Stephen was at the restaurant that evening. This information placed him in a more favorable position, as there was still no evidence of kidnapping or assault, and the possibility of Denise leaving on her own was still high. It was not uncommon in their society for someone to simply choose to escape from their life. However, Denise's parents completely rejected this possibility, as they had full faith in Denise and her love for her friends and family, and knew she would never do anything like that or go a day without seeing them. As the case grew more complicated, Denise's parents turned to the media for help. They appeared on TV, pleading for anyone with information to come forward, and offered a $5,000 reward for any leads. Within a few days, Denise's disappearance case gained widespread attention, and her photos and missing posters could be seen everywhere. Additionally, a large missing person billboard was placed on the highway where she disappeared. As the search for Denise continued, her family's distress and disappointment mounted with each passing day. They were constantly worried about Denise, especially as the police investigation led them to believe that she had been kidnapped. The fear of her being at the mercy of a dangerous criminal or being murdered lingered in their minds from day one. The police received numerous false sightings of Denise and information that proved to be unhelpful. One such lead came from a newspaper delivery girl who claimed to have seen Denise's car parked with its lights on one morning. But this information was not useful, as it was known that Denise had disappeared the previous night. The strange part was that there was a payphone booth nearby, which Denise could have used to call someone if she had pulled over to the side of the road due to a flat tire, as the police believed. Denise did not make the logical choice to leave her car and call for help using the nearby phone booth. Fast forward 3 years after Denise went missing, to July 1994, 400 miles away from California in Arizona. Jack and Elaine, a couple, needed to purchase wall paint for their business, and while browsing at a market, they came across a paint store that caught their attention. The vendor informed them that he had more paint colors at his house and offered to show them. The couple followed the vendor's car to his house and viewed various paint samples. The vendor claimed he had just moved into the house 6 months prior. Jack and Elaine noticed something suspicious, but kept it to themselves. After purchasing the paint, they drove home, and on their way, they glanced at each other with a look of concern. Elaine shared her bad feeling about the man with her husband. What they both saw was a Ryder truck, typically used for furniture transportation. The truck was covered in dust, parked in front of the house, and clearly hadn't been moved for some time. Jack and Elaine each took the truck's license plate number without the vendor noticing. They wondered why he had the truck and why he hadn't returned it to the company since moving in 6 months prior. Their first thought was that he had stolen it. The couple considered what to do next and then remembered they had a friend who was a police officer. They discussed whether or not to give their friend the license number, eventually deciding to do so. The following day, they called their police officer friend and asked him to check the license number in the database. The investigation confirmed the couple's suspicions that the truck had indeed been reported stolen 6 months ago. Before taking action, the officer decided to see the truck himself. When he arrived at the house, the vendor was not there, so he conducted a search and inspected the truck. The officer noticed peculiarities, such as weeds and plants growing around the tires and rust, indicating the truck hadn't moved since it was stolen. The officer noticed something suspicious in the back of the truck. He saw cables emerging from under the door and some chemicals nearby, causing him to shift the focus of the investigation from robbery to something far more sinister. He initially believed the truck housed a drug lab, which would explain the cables. After returning to the police station, he informed the DEA. Within an hour, the DEA arrived at the house and immediately went to the truck, which was secured with multiple locks that they promptly broke to gain entry. Inside the truck, they found paint cans and a freezer. The cables coming from under the door were found to be electrical cables for the freezer. The officers decided to inspect the freezer and were horrified by what they discovered. They saw a large black bag with frozen blood on the bottom, and when they opened it, they found a human arm. It was clear that there was also a human head inside a white bag. The officer opened the bag to reveal a young girl's head, with a cloth stuffed and duct taped in her mouth. The officers then realized they were not dealing with a robbery or drug case, but with a murder case that required investigation. The police officers observed a vehicle approaching the house and identified it as belonging to the homeowner. They swiftly decided to leave the truck without mentioning what they had found inside. They would only arrest the man for theft and not for the gruesome discovery. After apprehending him on theft charges and bringing him to the police station, they would interrogate him regarding the girl's body to gain more information about the situation. The man was identified as John Joseph Famolaro, a 39-year-old paint vendor who lived alone in the house. When John arrived, he was taken aback to see the police officers who informed him of the theft charges. He calmly swore that he had intended to return the truck. The officers stated that it didn't matter. They would still bring him to the police station for questioning. They sent the body found in the freezer to the forensics lab for analysis and identification, and took John to the police station for questioning. John was composed and answered all their questions until they asked about the freezer in the truck, at which point he refused to speak without the presence of a lawyer. The officers were convinced that John was aware of what was in the truck because he had admitted to renting it and returning it. So how could there be a body inside without his knowledge? The detectives then searched John's house, hoping to uncover additional gruesome details and determining if they were dealing with a serial killer. The detectives entered the house and found it to be in a state of chaos, with weapons scattered everywhere, which was both creepy and unnerving. As they made their way to the basement, they stumbled upon a blood-stained hammer that only added to their concerns. The more they searched, the more horrifying discoveries they made. While in the basement, they noticed a wooden board on the floor and, upon inspection, found a deep hole beneath it. The detectives were stunned, imagining they might find more bodies inside, and their fears were heightened by the knowledge of the body they had already found in the freezer. They'd brought in cadaver dogs to search the hole, but to no avail. Despite this, their suspicions of the man remained unchanged. The detectives continued their search and found a box labeled Christmas that contained a black dress, heels, jacket, ring, necklace, and purse, all stained with blood. These items were unmistakably linked to a missing person, and the sick man had even kept the receipt for the freezer, which was purchased several days after the person went missing. On the other hand, the forensic pathologist conducted a prompt autopsy on the frozen body before it thawed and decomposed set in. The frozen state of the body made it easier to identify and gather evidence, and fingerprints confirmed that it belonged to Denise. The pathologist found DNA evidence of rape and concluded that Denise died from a brutal beating to the head with a blunt object, around 30 strikes, and the murder weapon was probably the blood-stained hammer that was discovered earlier. Denise's skull was completely shattered. Despite John's involvement in all aspects, he remained defiant and refused to admit to anything during questioning at the police station. The detectives found that the freezer was powered by electricity from a neighboring house. To add to his crimes, John was even stealing electricity from his neighbor. The neighbor turned out to be his own mother, who claimed to have given him a power line because he couldn't afford to pay his electricity bills. John was hoarding all of Denise's belongings due to his obsession. The police found that John had kept clothes stained with Denise's blood in his closet and hadn't even bothered to clean them. It was chilling to think that all of these items had been in his possession for 3 years, and that Denise's body had been frozen since that time. Who was this monster? To add to the strangeness, John had collected all the newspapers that featured Denise's photos and had been following her case from the beginning. The question of Denise's relationship with John remained a mystery. Was she a friend? A co-worker? An investigation into John's past revealed that he was far from normal. He was a dangerous individual who had relationships with at least 5 girls. One of these women testified that John had taken her to a desert area and tried to strangle her, but she barely managed to escape and never reported the incident to the authorities. This serves as a cautionary tale to always speak out if something like this happens to you. Not reporting the incident to the police put not only the woman who escaped, but also other potential victims in danger. The girls who previously dated John claimed that he was mentally unstable, had a strange personality, and was violent towards them, which is why they all ended the relationship. Denise, however, did not know John and looked like one of his ex-girlfriends who had dumped him. Furious about this, John took revenge on Denise instead of the actual ex-girlfriend. This act of revenge was senseless as Denise had no involvement in the situation. Another theory was that John randomly chose Denise, but this was uncertain as he refused to admit any information. The police found John had a warehouse near where Denise's car was last seen that stored paint. Upon entering the warehouse, they noticed a small room with blacked-out windows. But using luminol, which detects cleaned blood traces, the police found large amounts of blood belonging to Denise in the warehouse. The police pieced together what happened on that tragic night and came up with the following likely scenario. When Denise's car tire went flat on the highway, she pulled over and John approached her, offering to help. But once he got out of his car, he grabbed a hammer and struck her on the head before dragging her into his vehicle. Evidence of scratches on Denise's heels suggested that she had fought back while being dragged. John then took her to his warehouse, where he assaulted and murdered her. The challenge was disposing of Denise's body, so he placed it in black bags and put it in a freezer he had purchased. John kept all of Denise's belongings. Years later, when he decided to move, he rented a truck with 2 drivers to transport the freezer from California to Arizona. He instructed the drivers to turn on the freezer every 2 hours to prevent the meat inside from spoiling, and they did not suspect a thing. Denise's body remained in the same state inside the freezer for 3 years without anyone knowing. The detectives believed that John may have dug a hole in his basement to bury the body, but this was not confirmed. John was a peculiar individual who lacked any feelings of remorse. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, he steadfastly refused to admit to any wrongdoing. He lived by the mantra of denying all accusations, no matter how much evidence there was against him. The detectives presented him with DNA evidence found on the victim's body that showed he had raped her, but he continued to deny the evidence and refused to provide a logical explanation. Fortunately, the evidence was sufficient to bring charges against John. No matter how strongly he denied the allegations, he was eventually convicted and punished for his crimes. John's trial took place on July 11, 1994, but his efforts to defend himself were in vain. It was revealed during the trial that John had suffered a traumatic childhood, which had a profound impact on him later in life. His mother instilled in him a fear of women and relationships, and taught him that dating girls was a sin. Unfortunately, this doesn't excuse John's heinous actions. No matter what challenges a person faces in their life, it's never acceptable to harm innocent people. In 1996, John was found guilty of kidnapping and murder, and he was sentenced to death. He remains in prison, waiting for his execution. The thought that John's only goal was to rape is sickening. It's unimaginable that someone could destroy another person's life, or the life of their entire family for their twisted desires. The news of Denise's death hit her family hard. Despite the passage of time, they still held on to the hope of her return, but now that hope was gone forever. John, the killer, followed the case in the media and watched the pain, tears, and heartbreak of Denise's family without remorse, all while her body lay in his freezer. This serves as a reminder that we must not turn a blind eye to suspicious or dangerous individuals. John's second crime might have been prevented if his ex-girlfriend had taken action, but it was Jack and Elaine's actions that had a positive impact. They notified the authorities about their concerns and suspicions, even though it was just a gut feeling, and helped bring the killer to justice. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and share the story. The best is yet to come.